Joining me on Briefing Counsel today is Andy Cooke, GC of TravelPerk. Welcome, Andy.
Hello, Richard.
Great to be chatting again. When we first met, you always struck me as kind of an unusual lawyer. So we'd have a lot of GCs who come to Jura and they'd say, we've got to increase efficiency in the legal team, but you were always thinking about things in kind of a way that was unusual. And you were talking about things like internal customer and service design and creativity and legal teams. Where did all this thinking come from?
Goodness me, that's a good question. Well, first of all, thank you for the compliment. And
you're weird. Welcome to
exactly. Congratulations on being weird. Look, I don't want to get into origin story stuff too much, but one of the things when I worked in private practice, which I did for a long time, I always felt that something was slightly off about how legal services got delivered. And it turned out that it wasn't me, it was them, you might say. Not to entirely dismiss the work of law firms, which is obviously very important. But I just never really, things that seemed really obvious to me about service design and delivery, even just going and asking the client after the event, like, were you happy with how that went? Could it have gone differently, which wasn't necessarily a regularly kept practice. Seems to me to be quite obvious. And a lot of the stuff, so during that period, I got knocked around private practice, sent off as a comment, sent off to different offices and so on, which is all fantastic training to be an in-house lawyer, particularly if you get sent off to lots of very interesting countries, which I had the great pleasure of happening. As part of that, I was constantly thinking that something was needed to change. And then, of course, when you run a team and then it's up to you as to what that service delivery looked like, you can kind of bring those ideas into play. And I've had the chance to do that in different teams, and now sitting in TravelPerk with a very supportive, very tech-led employer, which again, it's important to recognise the privilege of in that sense, right? Like, not everybody has somebody or a company they work for who is so embracing of doing things a different way and also supporting us with the budget. Like, I would like to think that we've delivered great results against that budget, but tremendously supportive, because the worst answer to any question in TravelPerk is always, well, everyone does it this way.
Sure.
Right? So there's this kind of very disruptive mindset from the start. And so if you're coming in with the perspective that we're going to do it slightly differently, and particularly with the customer at the centre, I don't think that should be controversial, but sometimes it can be in law. Then we have a receptive audience, which really helps.
It's amazing, this kind of first principles thinking that you have within the culture. But let's talk about your team. So you've built this, what seems like a highly creative and talented team who are doing really innovative things. But what do you look for when you're building that team and hiring folks into it?
Yeah, well, again, another real advantage that I had is a very clean slate to start off with, right? So I think when you're laterally hired as a general counsel sometimes, by which I mean there's already a team there and you're brought in to head it, quite often there's I don't have the data behind it, but it seems sensible to me to say that the employer that's hiring that role is looking for something to change, right? Because otherwise, why not just promote from the inside? And I think that could just be that there's almost the solution that this team was built to solve. So the problem that this team was built to solve has changed, and we just need some new thinking. It doesn't have to be a judgment call on the people there. It can just be, okay, some fresh thinking is helpful. But the offer to me, if you like, was there is no constraint on the budget, although I'm sure there is probably an upper limit at some point. There's no constraint on the budget. We are scaling at a very, very rapid pace. The number of people we hire on a daily basis, the amount of ARR is going through the ceiling. And we are really concerned that how we approach these things is going to start, well, it's already a constraint and it's just going to tighten. And so come in and solve that problem. But obviously having sort of solved that problem with your assistance, having solved that problem, we then started to go, okay, well, again, with a very customer-focused lens, what other problems are there that we can solve? And again, this is I'm sure lots of lawyers that are listening to this will have this experience. Lawyers have a really interesting viewpoint across businesses. And particularly with fast-scaling businesses where there hasn't necessarily been a lot of thought of organizational design, to have this real human intelligence, right? To actually interact with people who have challenges, problems to solve, great pressure in their roles. It allows us to, one of the things I think that lawyers are really great at, and I'll explain how sometimes private practice can lead us to take the wrong conclusion on this, but is to connect with people on a really human level and understand what their problems are and work with them on those kind of solutions. There are loads of other things that lawyers are really good at that I think are going to be very important to our future state, and that is one of them. I think sometimes that can lead us to insert ourselves into things where we don't really have any business being, or in the worst case, it can be like this idea of being at the table, right? Where actually just sitting in a room with some people is seen as being like some kind of, like, I don't know, success metric of itself, which is absolutely bananas insane when you think that you're sitting there, problems continue to be unsolved whilst you're sitting there just going, yes, that is a really excellent point, Mr. Chairman or Mrs. Chairman. Like just stop lying to yourself. Get out there and solve problems. Then you'll get influenced. But yeah. So again, we started, and then we just got into the cadence of surfacing and solving problems. Once you get into that, your relationship with customers really changes as well, because they see you as an ally in relation to how you're going to help them win, and by extension, TravelPerk win, and then everyone's winning, and you bring a different energy to the relationship.
Yeah, and it's something we see all the time, right? Which is this concept of innovation, which is kind of a slightly horrid word in a way, but we kind of know what we mean by that, and it really means kind of problem solving. We see kind of two types. One is the very top down type, which is a CEO one day says we must do AI or we must innovate in some way, and it's sort of somehow in the trickle down you find like an initiative where someone says, well, I've been told I must do AI, and therefore I've got this solution, I'm going to find a problem, we're going to sort of back reason it, and it doesn't always work out. And actually the minority are looking kind of bottoms up. Yeah. And for your team, how do you actually go about isolating and identifying the problems you want to solve before just going into the legal work and doing the stuff?
Yeah. We employ the radical and innovative step of going and asking people what their problems are, and then
think of that,
and then writing them down.
Yeah.
So now we actually, in fact, a member of my team recently built what's called she's called it Coffee Chat Simulator, which is essentially when you go out and have a chat with someone, you can take out your phone and just fire in what it is that you talked about, and particularly any pressures that have surfaced. It'll apply kind of like 5 whys to it, and then summarize this visually in terms of themes, right? But this is all very downstream of just going and talking to people, but actually having time set aside and a prompt to go and do it. Right? So again, it doesn't have to be a very structured conversation. They're literally called coffee chats, but in the past I've referred to it as love bombing people. But fundamentally, love a little brand for things. But fundamentally, it really is just about that, because my very strong belief is that there are, again, for most lawyers, there are 2 customer personas. There is the C-suite persona that has a very distinct set of needs. And you can extend that out to the board to the extent that, again, listeners have a regular interaction with the board, let's say. That is one persona. Everybody else is in a different persona. Their needs, interests, wants, concerns, desires, etc., are very distinct from those that a C-suite persona would have. And I think, again, GCs can often get themselves caught up in building signature products that appeal to the C-suite persona. And those are far more likely, I would guess, to be sort of brand-led, to your point, right? Let's show how innovative we are with a super-duper big project. Super-duper big projects may not meet the needs of the people at the coalface. But if you meet the needs of the people at the coalface, and particularly if you follow an approach of if you like it, tell your boss, if you don't like it, come back to me and we'll fix it. Over time, this is the long-term approach, over time, very gradually you will see that your reputation as being a problem solver will help you influence the people. So I'm hearing good things about legal. And that was ultimately, again, an approach that we took within TravelPerk, and I took it before in other companies. Be patient with your pace of innovation. like innovate. Like again, now clearly there may be scenarios where you time box. Sprints exist for a reason, right? Like
Sure.
agile workflows exist for a reason. Pomodoro technique, whatever it is, personal life hack bullshit stuff. That all works for a reason. But actually, giving people space to ideate is such a critical part of it. I mean, you must see this yourself in terms of the culture you're trying to build at Duro, giving people the space to sit with customer problems and work out solutions which are smart.
It's really hard, isn't it? I mean, you have to be deliberate about it because that the extreme scale that comes at you. There's such a sort of default temptation to solve those problems with human hours.
Yes.
Our commercial contract volume is increasing, therefore we need more lawyers. And
yes.
You have to have that room to go back to what is the root cause, like what 5 whys or whatever. What are we actually fundamentally trying to solve?
Yes.
But I mean, you guys have scaled up at a ridiculous level. I remember seeing one of those graphs on LinkedIn of sort of almost a vertical growth graph.
Yes.
And that happens more and more, right? In the AI world, companies are growing faster than they ever grew. But how did you cope with the pressure of growth while at the same time having that intent to be very mindful and thoughtful about what you wanted to solve? Like, what did you do?
Goodness me. Well, I don't always want to take it back to sort of solving problems, but actually the pressure of growth doesn't necessarily exert itself across all aspects of your workflow, right? It helps that this isn't my first team, or this wasn't my first team build, right?
Yeah.
So, and in fact, I was talking with we've just hired somebody in, although we do have a new joiner in legal, Alice Powell, welcome to TravelPerk tomorrow. But I was talking with somebody who'd hired in another function, and my job was to help them try and onboard in a way that was going to assist with their success. And one of the observations I made to this person is don't like Chicken Little. I didn't think she was going to do this because she had experience of working in a fast scaling company prior, but you can't come in and say everything's on fire. Right? And again, the temptation, you might have heard me use the phrase before, no one cares how hard you work. That's also a very important thing to understand here. Actually, coming in and saying, this is a number one problem to solve, and I'm going to stop doing absolutely everything else until I have solved that problem. That is a lever that you are entitled to pull. You don't have to control everything. New problems will arise when you implement your technology solutions. I mean, again, we've seen this with our own AI solutions, right? Like before, I didn't need to think very heavily about curating content. That's absolutely critical to the performance of bots. Right? So I implement, this is a LoRa system. So you implement one complex system, it creates another complex problem.
Yeah.
So again, I think initially, prioritization is really important, particularly when, if anybody listens to this is going into a new role, and particularly if it's their first GC role, be bold in your first 30, 60, 90.
Yeah.
Because very soon the world of problems will come to your door. If you haven't started making your moves, then the temptation can be like, I'm just going to sit
on the back foot, right?
Right, and you're on the back foot. And again, I spoke to a GC yesterday who was telling me, I don't have influence, and I can't, I'm trying to get new hires and I can't get them because I'm constantly being told that, okay, technology should be coming in and solving these problems. Okay, again, no one cares how hard you work. So just rid yourself of the martyrdom and get on with saying what actually is in front of me, what is the challenge that I'm facing, and how am I going to address it, and how are we, if that's more than just you, how are we going to organize our resources to solve that problem?
Yeah. And which is such a refreshing thing. I mean, it's so empowering for a team member to come in and be given to the license to act in that way. And one of the things our customers and in-house legal teams often kind of grapple with is how they measure success of the function. And there's kind of a lot of BS out there, right? Most of the metrics are kind of throughput or efficiency, or, if we've handled 1,000 contracts this quarter, therefore success. But I know you think about this a little bit differently. So how do you, for the team, how do you stay objective about outcomes over output?
Call me Johnny Controversial if you want, but I don't feel the need to prove value. Right? So again, I don't think you see, everyone knows what value is for salespeople, but I don't think you see CFOs, which is kind of, or let's say finance functions, really tearing themselves into pieces with regards to the concept of proving value. I think the value proposition of those functions is kind of obvious. I think the value proposition of legal can be obvious if we don't misrepresent our value proposition through the metrics that we choose to present or the way in which we choose to interact with the business. Okay? So if we say, well, my value as general counsel is as a trusted advisor, but for the rest of my team, I'll measure that through budget management, throughput, and what else? Time to close, let's say.
Yeah.
So if you do it cheap, you do a lot of it, that's good, is it? Is that what we're saying? Yes. Right. And what is this idea of this trusted advisor? Because that sounds pretty passive to me. It sounds like you're going to somehow sit there with your arms crossed, and I'm going to come to you as somebody who's actually putting the shoes on your children's feet, or whatever, building the product.
Not doing anything,
sell, right?
Just saying stuff.
I just go, oh, trusted advisor, please inform me
Sure.
with your great business experience, right? Like, again, all it's part of that harsh transition from private practice into in-house, is that you very quickly realize, that what has previously been a dynamic that you have grown to love, which is being that input. Everyone turns to the lawyer because of the problem to solve, and okay, the lawyer's going to come in with their magic bullet gun and solve our problem for us, so that's what we're here. Actually become an input, right? So again, thinking about the idea of the different personas, if you obsess every day about, what does the C-suite think of me, that's just going to block your ability to innovate.
Yeah.
Because you'll inevitably build towards something which is somehow quote unquote impressive.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a good use of your time or mental energy. Now, you could say, well, that's great for you. You could always fall back to, you've built these other teams before, so that, or whatever, and it's also great for you because you have this budget. Look, I've been in teams where I've had zero budget. I've been in teams where I've worked directly with CEOs who wanted to foster a blame culture, right? And Eagle's always there as a convenient whipping boy in their sentence, right? So again, I recognize the privilege, but equally, I also have learned from those things that it's not worth the mental energy sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Again, your value proposition can be proven out really effectively, I think, anyway, by going out and solving problems.
Yeah.
And the bigger the problems to solve, if it's a genuine business problem, right? Again, the value proposition is there because in contrast to the CFOs who do have the numbers and will therefore always be powerful because of the data that they have from a financial standpoint, we, as I touched on earlier on, have the human intelligence. Right? Yeah. And structure doesn't kill businesses. Like bad spreadsheets don't kill businesses. Behavior kills businesses. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if we're out there speaking to people and understanding where behavioral issues may be arising in the business, the most reliable pipeline for major problems, then again, bringing that information to life in a way which is intelligent, supported where appropriate by a metadata level view from our CLM, or natural language insights that flow from our AI tools, or whatever it may be. Like, that's so much more of an interesting conversation. Then again, if I'm coming with data insights that nobody else in the business has, and I understand problems at the coalface in a way that nobody else in the business does, and I can see trends across multiple teams that are very difficult to draw out in single-threaded leadership models, well then, again, I don't have to go, hey, by the way, everyone, this is value, because the value is just is self-evident.
It's interesting. I mean, we've just launched AI Extract, which is sort of in that space. And as we kind of talk to customers about it in the beta, we're expecting everyone to say, well, this makes me so much more efficient.
Yeah.
So that's often what we hear.
Yeah.
Uploading contracts every day, and now I don't have to manually tag them. We can do it with generative AI, whatever. And actually, it's quite interesting seeing as kind of a risk analysis tool that is surfacing risks earlier than they would be addressed.
Yeah.
And it's kind of this idea of tackle the cause rather than the symptoms right down the line. If it's okay, I want to come back to that. And if the listeners of the podcast, we are going to talk about AI, don't worry. But actually, I want to pick up on something you said. You talked about mental energy, and you talked about the human side of delivery. This is something I thought a lot about. And, I had Elizabeth Rimmer on this podcast, and at Scale Up GC, we had Anne-Marie Cavalier talking about lawyers' mental health. And it's a difficult question, but do you have a hypothesis why so many lawyers are so unhappy and so burned out?
Gosh, that is a difficult question. It's a thing. First of all, I certainly validate my perspective, your perspective on that. We have, like I've talked before about our DNA as a team, which has changed to Mystification Happiness. It's on absolutely everything internally. It's literally on the wall of the office wherever we have people. It's on mouse mats on our desks, it's on our merch, whatever. Driving people happiness is really important to me because of exactly that experience of meeting these wonderful, like, driven, successful, academically successful, completer finisher, kind of like very thin slice of a demographic group of success with all the tools to be successful in the future state of this. So again, I touched on the human element of it, but also we are fantastic curators and presenters of knowledge, right? And again, content. I mean, I'd say content is king. Content is the product going forward, right? Like, so we can extend that out into ways which are create incredibly compelling stories from a risk management standpoint. So all of that stuff is there. I think I do. So I don't want to just express sympathy towards it. Just to slightly solutionize on it, one of the things that I do see is, and it links to the value proposition thing. I don't know if it was the thing that connected in your head to raise the question, but I see a lot of legal martyrdom, for sure.
Yes.
For sure, which is, I'm working so hard and nobody appreciates me, and like no one understands what it is that I'm trying to do, and I just get called, the blocker and all that sort of stuff. And maybe the search for the value proposition is somehow linked to that, right?
Yeah.
If I show all this stuff in numbers, like look at how hard I'm working, look at this number of contracts that we're generating, and it's just going up, and I'm getting no results and all that kind of stuff, that somehow someone is going to see that, and it's like the bit in the rom-com where the nerdy girl takes off her glasses and kind of waves her hat, and oh god, the light is amazing. It's the first thing to recognise is that no one is going to come and say, oh my god, this is incredible, right?
Yeah.
And by keeping on doing what you're doing, actually, somehow your value and impact is going to be recognised, because that's just not the way these things work. So, are we going to continue to insist that we offer value through the current model, or are we going to try and address what our value proposition is and lean into the trickier questions around law? So, part of that will be, but if we use working very long hours and creating a lot of big documents as proxies for value, what happens when the AI creates, or when AI creates all documents, right? What are we going to do then? Do we consider ourselves to be completely immune from convenience trends in wider technology, starting with in the internet era and running through to today? And do we pretend that the fact that our core working tools, email, Microsoft Word, and now increasingly SELM, right? But still, like based on the number of LinkedIn emails that I get, there's still people that are not using it. Okay, quite fine. But our tooling's hardly changed in 20 years. Our customer dynamic has hardly changed in 50 years. And yet, think about how much services have changed everywhere else. Like, again, we consider clients to be increasingly unreasonable, but I do perceive that to be the gap between this wonderful world of convenience everyone experiences everywhere else and the lack of change in our profession. And so, yes, I understand that we can be conservative, and that's to a certain extent that's baked in, but we shouldn't kid ourselves, right? We shouldn't kid ourselves. And I think sometimes we can get into this space of, okay, you get into a doom loop about nobody appreciating you. Okay, well, just again, it's like I said, no one cares how hard you work. A different way is possible. It is up to you to define what it is, because no one's going to come in and say that.
Everyone helps you.
Right? No, again, and it sounds bleak, but actually just going, okay, I'm recognizing the reality of my situation, and I'm going to take steps to address that.
Yes.
So again, if you are in a team, and that team is telling you that it is completely burnt out, well then you have a choice. You are sponsoring the continued burnout if you just let people leave.
Yes.
And then load the team and then be like, okay, I need to get headcount in so that I can start again.
Yeah.
You've also got to be, so if that's not enough of a reason to move, then inevitably, like CFOs and CEOs, to your point, do read the press. They look at Klarna, rebuilding Salesforce within its systems, laying off its customer care workforce. Right, you are an expensive resource.
Yes.
And so again, if you're not really able to explain what your value proposition is in a way that AI cannot comfortably replicate, then draw your own conclusions. So I don't want to be like super burning platform stuff, but I also think that we've kind of put ourselves as lawyers in a bit of a position where our failure to innovate now may have cost us, let's say, thinking time. I think now is action time. And I encourage GCs to think about what their future, what the future state of the profession is, and take steps accordingly. I think that's being strategic.
Yes, and I think, I mean, in our experience, right, we have 98% of our prospects will say, my team is weighed down in low value work and we want to automate it. It's contract automation or whatever. But there's an interesting thing now, which is like, what is the, so people say, well, we don't have enough heads. Okay.
Yeah.
You go down a few levels of like, what are the priority challenges you need to solve? And it may not, the solution may lead you to, and we need more heads, but it also may not. And it may be, in fact, a terrible process, or in fact, we could also use AI agents to automate this thing.
Yes.
And I do think, we see examples of junior lawyers, folks in the legal team, legal ops, sometimes innovating from the bottom, but also incumbent on the leader to be doing that strategic thinking, right? That isn't just, it's 1995, let's throw humans at the problem.
Yes. But also, so apologies for jumping in there, what I was going to note there was, this is why I don't like people talking about efficiency.
Yeah.
Because again, or let's say, go ahead, be efficient. Like, being efficient is good. I don't think it's something aspirational. And I don't think that efficiency of itself necessarily improves the customer, like the value proposition as far as the customer is concerned.
Yes.
Because again, number one, it is part of our role to continue to deploy resources efficiently to get great results. And so efficiency is just part of the process. So we shouldn't be like, oh, look at us being efficient. That's insane. Like, no one else, again, in the business would make that claim. They just be like, well, congratulations on doing your job.
Yeah.
But also the danger is that you take a process which is already poor and you just speed it up.
Yes.
Which is, again, not be bolder than that.
Yes.
I also think it's a really interesting point that you make about pressure, and absolutely correct pressure coming in from younger lawyers who do not want any part of the current state of this, and are more than happy to call it out. And if you find yourself with a creative block as a GC or a team lead, go and speak to the people who have just joined the business.
Yeah.
Right. Like, again, there's a podcast many years ago that my colleague Tom Rice showed me, Spotify CTO, talking about how new users and experienced users offer different insights to your platform. Right, I'm sure you might have experienced this yourself, right? So we have some new joiners, so we are currently mining them for their perspectives, because now I work out how to get this thing out of this tool, and I just kind of adopt it as a muscle memory thing. So it's a bit annoying that I've got to kind of come out of that tool to go into that tool and copy this thing and paste it in there. But very soon it just becomes part of your workflow. So new eyes can be very powerful in terms of really radically reassessing your workflow and asking if it is fit for purpose. So simple things. Find the bylaws of our TOCO.
Yes.
Right. And I'm going to time you.
Yeah.
Right? And if you can't just do it immediately, then we've got a problem around hands from a knowledge structure standpoint.
Yeah.
So those people will say it as they see it. And I've had the privilege of being a strategy lead for a big company a couple of jobs ago.
Yeah.
Again, as a strategist, very often you can sit there and go, okay, it's on me to somehow come up with some kind of killer strategy. No, just go and talk to people at the coalface again. Yeah. Ask them what they think is insane about what it is that you do, and they'll tell you very readily. And again, we've seen some incredible. In fact, we were just talking about this before we joined. We're in a offsite process at the moment.
Yeah.
And again, we just try to keep that very unstructured, because I want people to surface what's top of mind to them in these processes. So much powerful information comes out of an unstructured conversation sometimes.
You're totally right about the new users versus old users thing. And of course, in in our world, we it's kind of a subcategory of CLM. A lot of the users who've been there for a long time are anchored to the product we have.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same for a legal team. So they'll say, we want another button here, or we want this workflow to be more complex, and then the new users, you have this refreshing take on, do we even need to log into a CLM? Why do we need to log into a CLM? So we get these feedback requests on sort of, could you just run the whole thing through Slack? Or those perspectives are interesting, but then it requires a level of psychological safety within the team for your new team member. Congratulations, to come to you on the first day and say, Andy, I think the way we do this is BS, and can we change it? And I think you would probably say, fantastic, well done, you're ramping well. But there are others out there who'd say, how dare you challenge the way things have been done?
Yeah. But again, that's so we go to the value proposition, and we go to that idea of like perception status being key to the whole charade.
Yes.
Okay. So again, if you're really obsessed with that C-suite persona, and that is a manifestation of the same problem. Like, you have to be seen to be this very important person within the business, and if you just put that idea on the shelf, okay, like in your darkest moments in the middle of the night, you might kind of go back to it, whatever. But if you put that idea on the shelf and you stop thinking about being important, being influential, those things, it's one of those. It's like when you're raising money as a startup. When you really, really need money, no one wants to give it to you. When you don't need money, then it's falling out of the sky. When you seek to gain influence, assuming no sort of Machiavellian in Eve's, all that. Once you put all that stuff on the side, and just again solve problems.
Yeah,
it's amazing how quickly that influence comes, because you can just see as someone who's rowing in the same direction as everybody else, rather than just going, okay, again, I will only sponsor that. Again, one of the things we talk about with younger lawyers is, don't give me the Instagram version of it, by which I mean that you take 1,000 photos and you post one, that's the one that I see.
Yeah.
All the messiness is part of the process.
Yeah.
And again, how many lawyers are prepared to be messy? Because we all have this, again, it's perfectionism and control. And so
trained in by the firms.
Right? You've got to be, you've got to be 100% right.
Yeah.
And again, that's so limiting.
Yeah. Legal team of the future. So obviously you're automating a lot, and contracts, and you're using AI agents for various things, and automating swathes of work which once were done by humans.
Yes.
What's that ultimately lead to in the legal team, 2, 3, 5 years out? Like what kind of future do these teams have?
Well, good news. I think the number of outcomes that we can serve is massively going to increase. And I think that's true across the profession as a whole, if we do this the right way. I'll come on to doing things the right way in a minute, because I do think that's important. I think that, again, we should assume that all legal deliverables, and I'm talking now about notes, advice, and sort of agreements and things, will be generatable on demand. So if we remove deliverables as a marker of value from the equation, well, then I think you do go back to the human intelligence part of this. So surfacing information, presenting it in a way which is intelligent, that relates to risk, and actually managing risk upstream rather than downstream through documents, I think is a much better positioning for legal of the future. And again, good news, when we think about the tools that we're using now and the possibility of data insights that come from those, I think that conversation becomes way more informed than it has done in the past. I think there'll be a lot less guesswork, right? And again, this idea of really how are we advising against risk right now is still pretty reliant on, I've kind of seen this before and I'm feeling in my water that there might be a problem there. I'd like us to become much more informed based on business intelligence. So, for example, right now we have and again, lots of listeners will have this kind of product in their stack at the moment, or a product like it, where the chatbot is basically just serving up information, and those chatbots like that could be powered through AI, or they could not be. We have both. We have one that wasn't GPT 3.500, and we powered it up with AI, just serving up information. Okay, so let's say right now that a chatbot like that in TravelPerk is serving about 6,000 queries a month. That's a lot of real-time data. It's a lot of real-time data. What are people interested about right now, and how's that changing over time? What's new? What's the little spin that our bids teams or our sales teams are asking about? Like, is it sustainability, or is it something specific about sustainability that was different to what they were asking about this time last year? Right? That sense of the possibilities of the data, I'm really, really excited by. And again, that is data that we can own and control and express in value-led terms to our customers. So when we're doing internal QBRs, we want those to be informed by, here's the things that we've seen that you have not seen. Right? So again, the idea of a value proposition there is not, here's how many contracts that we've done. Do you have any contracts that you need doing? Which is very often how those conversations go.
We've got some.
You got some too, amazing. That sort of data-led approach, I think is like super duper important. But to touch on a couple of things, summary of a couple of themes. Number one, we've got to, in order to bring about the future state, we are going to have to be way, way more curious about how all of this gets done and how it all gets delivered in a way that is delightful for our customers. If we are not curious about those things, then that is the scenario actually where it works out badly for us, I think. If we continue to stay static and lack that curiosity and interest and put it all on the table, and like everything's up for debate, other than our risk appetite on these things, okay? But we have a conversation about it once we set it, we should be consistent to it, let's say, but okay, fine. Let's put it all on the table how this works. Okay, do you feel very strongly that we should have NDAs? So let's not apply a solution to surface NDAs. Let's just ditch NDAs. If you're not prepared to ditch NDAs, well, maybe we get one NDA. Okay, but this idea that is what a lot of CLM providers lead with, like automating. I mean, what an insane thing. I am, like I was in litigation, I have not ever litigated an NDA.
Yes. It comes back to that kind of root cause analysis. Is that first principles? Why do we need an NDA?
Why do we need it? It should so curiosity, really, and then agency. By which I mean, so this is the 2x2, the top right hand corner, high curiosity, high agency. It is within our hands, right? And by our, I mean not just progressive counsel, let's say, but progressive vendors. One of the things that really appealed when we first met is your interest in helping lawyers to deliver a great outcome for their customers. That is very different from I'm helping lawyers as a means to raise VC cash for myself or whatever it is, right? Yeah. Or to be sold off to somebody else.
And it was controversial at the time, right? I mean, we were saying stuff like, contracts are not about lawyers.
Right.
And people, there was a lot of pushback, right? A lot of people said, no, it's all about lawyers and we control stuff and we do stuff.
Right. We have a death grip on this process. But again, so that group of, let's say, forward-thinking people, this is, and when I'm saying that, I want to be really clear that there is no judgment of anybody who is in the process of working this out for themselves, right? And the burning platform thing that I talked about earlier on, I do feel that pressure on the profession to move, but I express this in the most empathetic way to people that have not, have worked for people for whom innovation wasn't important, right? Or find themselves in a very conservative or very highly regulated environment. Like, again, I hear that it's a different problem to solve, but ultimately that doesn't change the fact that we've got to look around us and see how things are moving around that will influence how we deliver this service. So very highly curious and very active, right? Because again, you can be curious and you can be inactive, and you can find yourself writing the user manual for the Terminator. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you can find yourself in this place where actually you go, well, I see that everything's changing, but what I'll be is the stenographer to the change.
Yes.
Because this is the other thing. People go, I want to hear about AI solutions, but let's talk about AI governance.
Sure.
Right. Right. Now, again, we have very good responsible AI policy. We were very early out of the gate with some golden rules around AI, because that's very necessary in business when scaling fast, to just have some simple rules that people can ingest and remember and use to build with AI.
But it's not the end of the journey, right?
But it's not the end of the journey. So don't be the stenographer to Skynet, right?
Yeah.
Again, be active in your choices. Say, we are going to move into a place of customer centricity. I, as a leader of this team, recognise that change is required, and I embrace the possibilities that come from change. I'm excited for that transition. I'm happy to leave behind. I mean, let's embrace the idea of loss, right? Like those ways didn't serve us, not making us happy, and so we should leave those things behind and celebrate the fact of doing it rather than seeing it as being something that we're giving up. We're embracing the possibilities of change, and I think again that move into this really active, it is in our hands to choose a different way. And that you can extend that as far out as you want, right? Like again, I talked about AI increasing TAM. Well, that also follows that it increases access to justice, but it's only going to do it in a way which is wonderful for end users, claimants, defendants, participants. If we as lawyers make it so, otherwise you're going to get a quick save, budget-y, crappy version of it. That will, like again, inexplicably, all four of the big four will be involved. It'll cost £10 billion. And it will end up with, okay, you get to challenge parking fines and so on through a chatbot that has no recourse to any human, and you just feel like you're being ground down. And trust in institutions will continue to fall because it will suck as an experience. So let's not have that dark timeline happen. Let's get in there and define it.
And it comes, the common thread here, which we come back to again, is especially in the action and the execution. As you put it, the agency, and that's the potential is so exciting. I mean, reduced cost of legal services and accessibility to all is deeply exciting. But the delta is what we're going to do about it. And your team is obviously doing some groundbreaking work, and I think you and Tom and others in the team who kind of working on it. But we have to wrap up. But what keeps you excited every day? I mean, you've not chosen the easiest path. You're a hyper-scaling company, thinking about legal from first principle. What keeps you excited every day?
So super cliched answer, but I am blessed to work with a team. Again, we didn't get into the why we hire, who we hire, and so on, but we do hire for curiosity, right? And action orientation, and sometimes I also like to look for a little bit of a chip on the shoulder of a team member, right? A sense of a little bit of fire in them, that actually you're all wrong and I'm going to prove you so, right? And again, that kind of managing those personalities can be a management challenge, but you get incredible results when you make it happen. And again, working with people, creating that change, demystification, and happiness for lawyers in our own way. Again, we are very lucky to be invited onto things like this, to talk at conferences. We should try and get out there and connect with people in a way that pushes this message. Like, it is down to you to make the change, but good news, the only person stopping you is yourself. Right? So if we can just that little bit to push people into a place where they embrace that curiosity, where they embrace that role that they have in change, and that can be at any level. Like again, I've talked to GCs, but if you're in a team and you see that a customer of yours has got a problem and that problem is not being met, like just try going there and talking to them about it and helping them solve it. If there is very often we perceive there to be constraints, but there are no constraints because we ingest that hierarchy, which again you mentioned from law firms earlier on, this idea of being right all the time. Just go with an approach of support, curiosity, and amazing things can happen. So again, I'm so lucky to work in a place where I get to be innovative. I'm so lucky to work with people that are receptive to innovation and will call me out on my immense bullshit on some of these things I've done. And to be excited about being in a place that's growing, like TravelPerk is growing. So again, blessings every day, as they say, Richard.
Well, it's a positive message. I think my takeaway, curiosity and agency, and great things can happen. Thank you so much for being on Brief Encounters.
Thank you.